Alright, this is a very interesting exercise and a bit more advanced. I was contemplating about moving this exercise to the second chapter instead of doing it here, but I believe in you. I think you can do it. This is where we will practice and understand why moving, rotating, and scaling items in perspective is very important for concept art. The image on the left is the reference photo of a workstation, with all the tools and items on top of it arranged in a certain way. So first I drew the table with nothing on it except for the shelves, and I redrew all the tools by themselves and set it on the side. My goal here is to redraw this setup but in a completely different arrangement. So not a single item has to stay in its place. So you will have to move, rotate and scale every item to fit its new location. You can't just move it and expect it to be the same size at the start of the table as it is in the end. So we have to really think hard on how every item will look like after moving it. You can use technical drawing here if you want, but I will go with freehand instead. If you are still a bit not sure about it, please go with the technical way with all perspective lines and measurements we studied before, if it makes it easier. I will use a combination of the two here just to show what goes in my mind as I'm sketching up the tools on the table. Here how I will start this. Let's take this set of tools that was on the back wall of the station and try to remove the tools out of the stand and put them around the table. What I need to estimate now is how big these tools will be when they are on the table, not on the wall. It will be part guessing, part calculating the bounding box of the tools and how it will look like on the surface of the table. Once I have the general location, I can now start drawing the bounding box of the tools in a different orientation, scale, and location. Now I don't want them to be as static as they are on the stand. So once I got the approximate location, I can now add a new layer and draw the actual tools one by one in the same location but make it a bit more dynamic. Like someone actually took the tools out and placed it on top of the table. So basically we are trying to tell a story here, instead of just moving tools around. Once I have the initial sketch for the tools down, I can move on to the next item. The oil bottle was on the shelves at the back, so let's move it forward. This is how I would go at it mentally. I will draw the bounding box, move it down vertically to the tabletop, and from there I can move the box horizontally with the vanishing point toward the right edge of the table. Again, this is not 100% accurate without all the lines, but if you are 1% wrong, it's fine in the grand scheme of the overall painting or drawing. Once I have it on the table, I can move it to the edge by duplicating the bottom face of the bounding box all the way to the right side. For the top part of the bounding box, I can extend the bounding box back there all the way to the front to get the bounding box for the oil bottle in the new location. If you compare the two bounding boxes, you can see how it scaled up as we moved it forward in perspective. Now I can start adding the details of the oil bottle in the new location. And here it is. The second item is done. Moving on to the paint canisters. Their original location was in the middle shelf, and we want it to be moved closer near the oil bottle. So let's guesstimate the bounding box and move it down to the top of the table and then to the side, like we did before. Once I have the bounding box in place, I can start adding the details to the bottles. I don't want them to be in the same arrangement, so let's move them around. Let's lay it down on the table as well. We can again do all the calculation mentally here and guesstimate how it will look like in the new scale, orientation, and the new location. If you're having trouble imagining how things will look like in different orientation without a reference, try to find a reference photo for the object and draw it as you see it in the correct position. It's always okay to use reference photos. Never forget that. Let's move on to the canister behind the first one for the overlapping effect. I don't want to just place items in isolation. I want them to interact with each other and overlap one another to make them look natural. I forgot to add the stand for the tools in its place on the back wall. It should be stationary, so let's add it back there and hide the intersection part with the new items. Next on the list we have the blueprints and the scrolls. The blueprints should be on the table of course, but let's change the orientation a little bit so it doesn't look the same. Let's figure out the bounding box and then rotate it clockwise. What I want from my design to be more chaotic. The original image was all arranged in order. I want mine to be the opposite. Like someone walked there already and didn't clean up afterward. So let's imagine he was working on a piece and then just moved the paper to the side to work on something else. The paper will be underneath the screwdrivers rotated a little bit. So let's draw it there with the triangle and the pen. As for the scrolls, let's draw some of them laying down on the paper and some standing up, just like we did with the canisters. Always look for more interactions between the objects. Like don't line them up side by side or they will look weird. Make sure they overlap and interact with each other like normal objects in real life. Alright, next we have 3 tools on the back wall. Let's move them on the top of the surface like they have been already used and not put back. Here we have to do the opposite. The tools will look bigger since they are closer to the viewer than the far left side of the table. So we need to take that in consideration as we place it and rotate it a little bit. The second tool is rotated outwardly toward the edge of the table, which will make it not only look smaller but also foreshortened, as it's going back toward the horizon. I didn't like the placement there, so it's given me some issues. So let's put it on hold for now and move on to the next. Let's put it crossing the sun underneath it. That works. Let's go back to the wrench and now place it at the edge in a different orientation and see how it goes. Okay, I like this better this way. Next we have the hammer and the scotch tape. The scotch tape is easy, it's just a little tube, so we can place it anywhere. The hammer in the original image is already foreshortened, so it will be hard for me to get the details of the design for the hammer from this image. So I went online and got a similar design in a different orientation. Like I said before, when you are in doubt, search for a reference. So I put it aside and draw the hammer on the table. As you can see, I didn't copy the reference, which is the point here. I learned the design of it and placed it still foreshortened but the other way around, while observing the original hammer and the reference photo. I have enough information from these two to draw my own. This will come with experience and practice, so don't worry if you didn't nail it the first time, excuse my pun. Some of the items will look weird, but don't worry, we will take an overall look at the end and fix any issues there. Sometimes when you draw a scene item by item, you will get lost in the details before going back and looking at the overall image. Moving on, let's draw the next tool. This time taking it from the tabletop to the top shelf. So it will get a bit smaller since it's moving a bit back toward the horizon. But also the ellipse of the canister will be flatter as we go closer to the horizon line. Don't forget that ellipses will flatten out as we go toward the horizon line. I will also rotate it 90 degrees to make it look different. You can see the difference in size between the two. Next we have a simple box that was in the middle shelf. Let's put it on the empty space on the tabletop. We can't see what's in it in the original image, so let's add random things in there for fun. Okay, what's next? Let's add the handrail and the canister that were on the top shelf in different locations. The handrail will be on the tabletop at the edge of the right side, but the original image is too foreshortened again, so let's get a better reference. And then draw from all the information we have on the handrail in a different orientation. For the canisters, let's draw them one step down to the middle shelf and toward us a little bit, so they will be bigger, but not by much. Time for the lantern. Okay, let's take it from the front all the way to the top shelf on the back side, so it will be much smaller as it moves there. The table is getting a bit busy, so let's hide the layer so we can do our calculations in peace. First, I move it to the tabletop by using duplication and measurements, then back toward the shelf location, and finally I move it vertically toward the final placement. When I move it to the location of the table, I can move the height vertically to find out how high it will be up there. And here is the bounding box. You can see how small it is in comparison to the actual lantern location due to the perspective convergence. Now the hard part is done. Let's add the details. Now my estimation was a bit off when I compared the two. It shouldn't be this small. So even when you do the quick calculations part, you still need to use your common sense and adjust accordingly. Not by much, just a little. Now that I have the lantern near the horizon, I need to flatten the lines of the ellipse there to make it fit with the perspective angle. We have the most complicated tool here, the bench vise. This has to be stationary on the table, nailed down on one location, so I can't just put it anywhere. So let's do the same adjustment. I want to move it from the far corner to the close one. So let's move the screwdrivers a bit to fit the vise in its location. That's why I didn't bother with the details yet, because anything I draw here is subject to modifications. Never get married to your designs. Always be open to move and change things as you go along. That's how great ideas are born. So after moving things around, I felt it will be just too crowded up there for the screwdrivers to be there as well. So let's put them down at the bottom shelf. Of course that means different perspectives, so let's adjust that as we move them down. Let's draw the blueprint again without the screwdrivers. Okay, now we can draw the vise. Let's bring in the reference for it and the original one and draw the new orientation for the vise. Here is where your knowledge in basic shapes come in handy. I don't draw the vise in details right on. I dismantle it bit by bit. The cylinder on the bottom, the large box as the main body, the two parts of the vise rectangles, the trapezoid in the front, and finally the cylinders at the end of the vise. Build it bit by bit using basic shapes so you don't get overwhelmed with the details right away. Now that it's drawn, I can move it around and fine tune it a little bit more. And it's done. Finally we have the big box and the pencil as the final two items. Let's put the pencil on the back wall where the saw was hanging. Now it has two handles, so it will take the placement of two nails. It will be a bit bigger since we are moving it from the bottom, but also smaller since we are pushing it back away from us. And there it is. For the box I can't find a place for it, but let's not put it in the same location. Let's move it to the floor, like the person there took something from it and left it there. So let's add the box and draw different arrangement for the items inside. And it's done. We have successfully rearranged the station with more chaotic style by moving, rotating, and scaling items around. This is the application to what the lesson was about. We won't be moving boxes in perspective all day. We will have to use it for a purpose. Adding the line weight and line quality. Here is the final image. Bring any image from Google like a desk with computers on, or a student table, or even a dining table, and try to rearrange this item in perspective like I did here. And really enjoy the process, because this is the first step in props design. This is no longer copying an image, but actual design and concept art, or at least the first steps of it. So do have fun with this exercise. This has been a long exercise, but completely worth it. We use almost everything we learned about in the first chapter to make this possible, and you can try it with any reference, as we mentioned before. So do as much of this as you can and enjoy the process. Let's pick up more exercises in the next video. For now, this has been fun. See you in the next video. As always, if you like this video, feel free to leave a like. If you have any question, leave it down in the comment section and I will do my best to answer them as soon as possible. To stay notified for future lessons, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.